The key to installing your organization system is a well-anchored level steel rail. The rail forms the backbone of your organization system, and its correct installation will ensure that the rest of the system goes up without fuss. Before we start, make sure that you have all the tools needed. A complete list of tools can also be found in your instruction booklet. This video will break the installation down in 3 easy steps: marking where to mount your rail, cutting it to length, and mounting it to the wall. First, we need to mark where to mount and install the rail. This will involve finding the correct height, where the verticals of your organization system will go, and where the rail will be supported by underlying studs. First, determine the rail height based on the desired height of your organization system. To allow sufficient space for double hanging clothes, a height of 84 inches for the top of your system is recommended. This height can be adjusted up or down for your needs. Some reasons that you may want to move your rail position up or down include vaulted ceiling, a ceiling lower than 8 feet, the need for extra storage up top, personal preference, your height, and obstructions such as a window, vent, or cold air return. The rail will be placed 8 1/4 inches lower than the top of the vertical, which means the rail will be installed with its bottom edge at 75 3/4 inches from the floor. Measure up from the floor and mark where the top of your verticals will go. This height will be based on your project plan or on your adjusted height. Be sure to account for at least a 1-inch clearance from the top of the vertical panel to the ceiling. Next, measure 8 1/4 inches down and mark this spot. Place the bottom of your rail on the mark and draw a level line to mark your rail height. The rail will be installed with its bottom edge on this line. Next, we will need to find the wall stud locations. Use a stud finder to locate the center of the studs. Standard 2x4 studs are typically 16 inches apart on center. Mark the center of the first stud and measure over 16 inches to the middle of the next stud. Continue marking studs as needed. Next, reference your project plan and use masking tape or painter's tape to mark the locations for each vertical. It is unsafe to place a vertical on top of screw heads or toggle bolts. Doing so can cause the notch to break. That is why it is important to draw on the wall where the vertical, studs, and toggles will land, so you can avoid overlaps and plan for the safest, fastest installation. Now that you have marked where to install the rail, it is time to cut it to the correct length. The next step is determining the rail lengths. The rail will need to extend the entire width of the organization system on each wall. In most reach-in closets, that length will run from corner to corner. In walk-in closets, the width of the design may stop in the middle of a wall. Review your design to establish the total necessary rail length for each wall. In many circumstances, 2 rails will need to be used on a single wall. When determining the rail length, it is important to remember that each rail should be screwed to the wall at a minimum of 2 wall studs. The ideal solution is to cut the 2 rails to a length where the middle seam will meet at the location of a wall stud, so both rails can be screwed into that middle stud. When a design ends in the middle of a wall, the design will call for a half-drilled finished vertical panel. Finished verticals with no holes on one side will require the rail to end 1/4 inch short because the vertical notch is not cut completely through. Subtract 1/4 inches from the overall rail length for each finished vertical. To cut your rails to length, use a hacksaw, sawzall, or jigsaw. Cut on the back of the rail with the open end facing down. To contain the metal shavings, cut the rail above empty packaging that contain the product or cut it outside. Avoid cutting over carpet. The last step is to securely mount the rail to the wall using screws and toggles where necessary. If a vertical will be more than 3 inches from the stud, a toggle bolt is necessary. You will mark one toggle to either the left or right of the vertical. Place the bottom edge of the rail on the rail height line. Then screw the rail into the stud that's nearest to the center of the rail. To mark toggle locations, hold the rail level on the rail height line, then mark for a toggle in a hole that's close, but not under the vertical location. Make sure the toggles are not being placed behind the verticals. Now rotate the rail. Install easy toggle anchors into drywall until the face is flush with a wall surface and arrows on the face point up and down. Now rotate the rail back and mount the rail to the wall with toggle bolts. Tighten bolts with a screwdriver. Do not use cordless or impact drivers, and do not over-tighten or the drywall will be weakened. It is important that the rail is straight and not conforming to an imperfect wall. To locate any hollows or bulges in the wall, use a long straight edge such as a level. Wherever the wall hollows, loosen the toggle bolts, insert shims, and retighten the bolts. The steel rail can also be mounted to concrete walls. Using a masonry bit, drill pilot holes at least 1/4 inch deeper than the screw penetration. Install masonry screws every 6 to 8 inches and at each rail end. If your walls have steel studs, easy toggles will be used to support the rail. Avoiding the metal studs, install toggles every 6 to 8 inches and 2 at each rail end. Every wall stud along the rail should have at least 1 screw, but 2 screws per stud is recommended. The screws may need to be angled slightly towards the stud to make good contact. Screws into the wall studs should not be placed behind verticals if possible. However, if the vertical must rest on a screw, use a 3/8 inch drill bit to remove a small area below the vertical notch where the screw head will sit. Once you have completed this rail installation, proceed with the remaining steps of your system installation.